We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Monday, January 20th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're watching News Generation. Joining us today is Cho Yeon-woo.
Happy Monday.
Welcome back. Happy Monday. And Grace Park.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. So, it's Monday, time to discuss topics trending among our generation. With less than 2 months until the start of the new school year here in Korea, it's time for students to start preparing. And a quick reminder for our viewers, here in Korea, the school year starts in March. And for college students, this also means it's time to pay tuition fees before heading back to campus. And recently, some Korean universities have announced plans to increase their tuition fees. So starting off, Hyun-woo, why is this happening now?
That's right. This proposed plan to raise tuition by some Korean universities puts an end to a more than decade-long freeze maintained under governmental pressure and policy. The biggest reason for this hike has been cited as financial strain, especially with high inflation and a declining student population in Korea. According to the Korean Association of Private University Presidents, 9 out of 10 surveyed out of the 152 private university presidents noted difficulties in maintaining educational facilities, hiring high-quality faculty and staff, and providing student benefits due to the freeze. With these circumstances, 53% responded that they plan to increase tuition for this academic year.
I see. And as just Hyun-woo mentioned, we're actually seeing universities here in Korea raising tuition fees. The most recent university has been Ewha Women's University. A few days ago, the university announced that it will raise its tuition fee by 3.1% this year. So, Grace, now I want to ask you, has raising the tuition fee has been a common practice here in Korea? And I heard that there is a limit to which universities can raise these fees.
That's right. Under the current legislation, college tuition in South Korea can only be increased within a range that does not exceed 1.5 times the average inflation rate for the 3 preceding years. However, since 2009, the government has indirectly regulated tuition fees by withholding financial support from universities that raise them. This policy has resulted in most institutions maintaining a tuition freeze for over a decade, despite inflation and rising operational costs. However, the sentiment has shifted this year, with university leaders widely agreeing on the need for higher tuition fees. Due to ongoing financial struggles, 6 universities increased their tuition in 2022, 17 in 2023, 26 in 2024, and the number of universities following suit are expected to increase even further this year.
Right, so we're gradually seeing more number of universities in Korea implementing a fee hike.
Right.
And Grace just explained that Korean universities are restricted by a limit on how much they can raise tuition fees. To sum up once again for our viewers, under current law, universities can increase tuition fees, but only up by 1.5 times the average inflation rate over the past 3 years. And this year, the percentage is 5.49%. So Grace, I want to also ask you, could you please explain to us why this limit was implemented in the first place?
Sure. So as some of you may know, South Korea boasts a high college entrance rate. And for quite a while, more than 80% of Korean students went on to college, although recently that number fell to about 75%. However, due to the high tuition fees, we saw a growing trend of students going more and more into debt before they could even manage to officially enter the job market full time. In fact, most millennials and Gen Z are busy paying off their tuition after getting jobs. And because of this, politicians and lawmakers have pledged to regulate tuition increases and promised policy support. And a national scholarship system was created with around 75% of students currently receiving scholarships.
Right, so looking from the student's perspective, actually raising the tuition fees is kind of like bad news because, as Grace mentioned, once again, students are still struggling with paying off their debt even after graduating and getting a job. Then, Hyun-woo, I want to ask you, why has this tuition ceiling on tuition fees have become so much of a big challenge for many universities at this point?
Right, as prices have skyrocketed, universities have been met with financial difficulties as tuition fees, which are their primary source of income, have remained at a standstill. In fact, college tuition in 2023 was found to be worth 20% less than that in 2011 when adjusted for inflation. As was shown in the survey previously, difficulties in maintaining their finances and facilities have been noted to have decreased Korean universities' competitiveness with their global or foreign counterparts. Many universities claim that the cost of college in Korea today fails to reflect the price of other educational offerings, with the average yearly fee for English language kindergarten sitting at 20 million won, or roughly 14,000 US dollars, which is 2.9 times higher than that of private universities. Even puppy kindergartens or pet daycares in Seoul were found to charge 600 to 900,000 won per month, or roughly 400 to 600 US dollars per month, which is a price of up to 1.5 times higher than these universities.
Right. So based on what Hyunwoo mentioned, we kind of get why universities, schools are trying to increase their tuition fees, because they want to provide the best student services, they want to upgrade their facilities, and so much more. So we're going to now delve deeper into how students who are being enrolled at these schools are reacting to this plan. So Grace, could you first tell us how they're responding to this change?
Sure. According to a recent survey conducted at Yonsei University, 9 out of 10 students were against the increase in tuition fees. And among the reasons for the argument saying that these costs should be frozen or even lowered were that, first, students don't feel that they receive the adequate amount of educational services that they're actually paying for, and that compared to the level of tuition that they are paying, they're not satisfied with student welfare and on-campus facilities. And some other responses included that tuition poses a big financial burden and that tuition fees still feel too expensive.
Right. So even in the current level of tuition fees, students are feeling that they are not deserving what they paid for.
Right.
Right. Then I want to ask the same question to Hyunwoo, because you are the only panelist or the person here in the studio who is actually going to university right now. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so because I am a college student, I can't say that I welcome this trend of tuition hikes in private universities with completely open arms. Much like the survey in Yonsei University, many students and friends of mine have doubts about whether this increase will actually improve the quality of the educational services that we receive when college tuition already feels expensive as it is for many. Thankfully, our university hasn't planned to raise its tuition yet, so I guess we're on the safe side, but I can't help but think that universities outside of Seoul must be hit hardest by these economic and social burdens. I'm not surprised that at the extreme, some students have voluntarily called for their universities to improve their educational conditions at their own expense of paying more for tuition. So what's most important is a reconceptualization of the Korean higher education system that reflects the country's current needs and trends and is able to maintain that competitiveness at the global level.
Right. So far we focused on the tuition fee system here in Korea. We're now going to take a broader look and compare Korea's college tuition system with that of other countries. So Grace, are the costs of higher education in other countries similar to Korea, or would you say there is kind of like a big difference?
Well, the average annual tuition in Korea as of now, or as of 2020 actually, is 4.8 million won, roughly 3,300 US dollars for public universities, and 8.8 million won, or a little over 6,000 US dollars for private universities. And to share a little bit more about my experience, I attended university in the United States where college tuition is very expensive, and it's not strange for most students to go into debt to pay for their degrees. I was fortunate because I was eligible for in-state tuition, which is lower than out-of-state tuition or for international students. But I don't remember a single time where I wasn't working a part-time job to contribute to my tuition or to make money for food or play and other expenses. And like me, my friends and my peers were also in a similar situation, with most, if not all of them, having jobs, part-time jobs to pay for their degrees or even relying fully on financial aid. And according to a recent survey, the annual average tuition at American universities is around 38,000 US dollars for private universities and $10,000 for residents attending state universities.
So students feeling that their tuition fee is high or expensive is not just a concern only here for students here in Korea, but in other countries such as the United States. Then what about in other parts of the world, Hyunwoo?
Yeah, on the other hand, students in countries like Germany and France pay little to no money for college tuition. Japanese and European universities cover their relatively little tuition revenue with a lot of government funding and subsidies. And in fact, Germany and France are countries that spend the highest and second highest on higher education funding at the federal level within the OECD, respectively. Because I also do study at an American university too, our main campus, like many others in the US, also covers much of its finances through endowments given by its donors, something seen that's rarely in the case of Korea.
Right, so the situation or the systems are a bit different when compared to other parts of the world. To find out more, we also asked our viewers how much university education typically costs in their country and whether they find it expensive. And here's what 3 of them shared with us. So our first comment for this Monday is by Roddy Russell Jr. 93. In the U.S., tuition can get as high as $670,000, but many students qualify for financial aid and government grants that bring that cost down. Benny D97 says, back in my university days, it cost almost 38,000 Philippine pesos, almost $650 for me to study, which was a struggle at that time. But there are some good payment options if you study at a private university. Pak Daeon says, in Mexico, it varies but ranges from 100,000 to 200,000 pesos. All right, so for a more global perspective, we're now going to bring in a professor from France to our talks after this short break.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
So today we're joined by Christopher Godden, Professor of Political Science at Kookmin University in Seoul. Welcome back to the show, Professor.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Professor, we first want to ask you, how much does it typically cost to attend college in France, and how does it compare to the costs in Korea, in your opinion?
The main difference with Korea or America, we heard about before, is that in France, most universities and best universities are public. So, therefore, tuition fees are extremely low. They mostly depend on your parents' income, and even better, it's very common to receive subsidies from the state to study. You know, when you say in Korean or in English that you've received a scholarship, generally a scholarship only implies lower tuition fees. In French, tuition fees does imply that you are receiving money from the state. So you could say that costs are not only minimal, but negative from this perspective.
And Professor, what is the general public sentiment toward tuition fees? Do people think that higher education is affordable or overpriced?
The main difference with Korea here is that living expenses in France are significantly more costly than in Korea. The cost is not mostly about tuition fees. It is about the rent, it is about grocery, etc., etc. So on the one hand, the French public cares a lot about a high level of public service, which is true, but little is done, on the other hand, to provide affordable housing. Another difference is that, you know, in Korea, many students keep living with their parents. In French culture, theoretically, you should start living on your own the moment you graduate from high school. And this has become an increasingly difficult task to perform because of real estate issues. In France, the issue is less about tuition fees, it is more about real estate and inflation, as everywhere else in the world, I would say.
Thank you, Professor. Do you feel that more support, such as subsidies or financial aid, is needed to make higher education accessible to more people?
Well, obviously so. It is necessary, but it is not sufficient. Because as you mentioned earlier, in America, most students are forced to take a part-time job to provide, or to contribute at least, to their own tuition fees. So this creates inequalities. That being said, France does not have this sort of issues, as tuition fees are minimal. And despite all of this, when you look at numbers, you will not find that the French higher education system is any fairer than it is in America. Kids from the working class, for instance, still have a very hard time graduating high school. It is very difficult for them to make it to the best schools of the country because the skills that are needed in terms of, for instance, foreign language, they do not depend on the education provided by public schools. For the most part, you need to attend schools overseas, the same way as in Korea. You need to attend some private classes, and all of this is not provided by the state. My point here is that, of course, subsidies help, but a broader perspective is needed in order to ensure actual equality within society. In one sentence, in a nutshell, subsidies help, but they are not sufficient.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. Hope you have a great start to a new week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so ending off, the most recent data from the Korean Educational Development Institute shows that in 2023, South Korea's college enrollment rate reached 76.2%, marking an all-time high. So as this data shows, with more students in Korea going to college, how do you think we can create a tuition system that ensures equal opportunities for those who wish to pursue higher education?
Right, it's definitely a hard question to answer, and I think that Korea is somewhat of a fortunate case where higher education has remained relatively accessible for students, as shown by our high domestic higher education enrollment numbers.
Right.
Yet for universities to maintain that competitiveness and merit in the local and global markets, they need to build upon or at least maintain their current educational offerings, which simply isn't possible without more money.
Right.
So I worry especially that should these trends continue, disparities will grow between universities that are wealthy and competitive enough to fund themselves versus those unable to, leading more students to these high quality institutions. I think that there needs to be a stronger foundation and backbone for future universities that meet various labor demands and academic demands in a regionally distinct and dispersed manner.
But I think this is a really hard question to answer because we kind of get where both sides are coming from, the opinions. So maybe facilitating more discussions, such as what we're doing right now in NewsGen, could help. Then what about you, Grace?
Yeah, it's definitely a complicated topic. On one hand, you have the university administrators arguing that raising tuition is essential to maintaining educational quality and attracting the top quality faculty. And on the other hand, students are arguing that tuition is already too high and that they are still not completely satisfied with the level of educational services that they are receiving. And so I think lawmakers will have to create a new support measure for both students and institutions to ensure equal opportunity in the country's higher education system. Every student should have access to the same educational opportunities regardless of their financial circumstances. And equal opportunity in education is actually the foundation for an advanced economy and society. And there's a direct link between education and a country's level of development, as a strong educational system fosters high quality talent in the labor force and enhances national competitiveness.
Right, so I think that it all boils down to how to balance equal education and also high quality education, which is once again a very tricky question to answer. So if you have any opinions or thoughts you'd like to share on today's topic, please leave a comment below on today's NewsGen episode. And that's all from us today, but NewsGen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Choi Hyun-wook.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and Grace Park.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for watching, and see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
Generation.